very good afternoon, and thank you for being a patient audience. We've got three industry experts who are going to talk about risk culture. But before I, pose some questions to each one of them, yesterday I was with one of the regulators at the Bombay Stock Exchange, and I asked a simple question to the lady, "What is risk culture?" And she said, "Risk culture is like thin air in the office. It's invisible, but it's so critical. And one person who can pollute the environment can completely disrupt the entire organization's attitude, behavior, like Uday mentioned." I then happened to speak to someone at SEBI, and I again asked the same question. What do you define risk culture as? Let's not look at the jargons or the frameworks or international standards. And he said, in my view, risk culture is a chain, and every employee is supposed to be responsible to ensure that the ownership of risk is at the highest level. So again, this boils down to the fact that risk is everyone's responsibility. It no longer should sit in the boardroom. It should no longer sit at the CRO level or the risk management committee level. But how do we make sure that risk permeates at the shop floor, the plant, your branches, across the organization? So with that in mind, Venkatesh, if I can start with you, you've been a veteran in the risk management profession, and having worked for so many years, seen transformational shifts in how organizations look at risk. What has been the difference between 2008-9 to 2018-19, typically after the financial crisis, and then from 18-19 till today? How has risk culture typically evolved in organizations?
So I must admit, every question that Hersh is going to ask me is going to be a black swan. So I do not know what he is going to ask, and I do not know what I'm going to answer, but I just hope something comes out that makes sense to all of us collectively. So, I mean, quickly, I can say that, for example, our own organization's risk, we all have we already spoke about the risk culture a little bit. Various words are there. It's the smell of the place, and there are so many other terms to use. Ultimately, it is also about the behavior, not only tone from the top, but also behavior from the top, which shapes the risk culture. So, my experience has been that, say, pre-2007, I would not specifically put only this, but let me put it like this. Organizations which have had very, very disastrous impacts of certain external or internal events, who have eventually survived it, have got a much, much stronger risk culture than others who have only heard about this. So what do I mean by that? So for example, had Enron survived whatever they went through in 2000, 2001, probably they would have been a very, very strong company today. So an Enron kind of situation almost happened to Siemens Limited in 2006-07. And we had a monitor for the next 3 years in Germany. The entire managing board was sacked and so on and so forth. But eventually we ended up coming a much stronger as an organization. So the key is experiencing the effects of not having a good culture and surviving it, and ultimately you perhaps you will never go back to that stage which brought you over there. So I think that is what really is shaping culture. For others, it is more of a story of, I've heard that there is an accident. So there's a difference between actually hearing about an accident and feeling the impact of the accident, being hospitalized and then coming back. Now, having said that, not everybody needs to go through this drastic measure in order to have culture. You can definitely learn from others. And one of the things which I have been also trying to do, not only in my organization, but also in the community, is make people feel what it means for a 100-year-old company or a 150-year-old company to be shaken to its roots. So feel it. So you may not have actually experienced it, but just imagine tomorrow a company which was there is no longer there, and you were an employee of that company. How will you feel about it? And that can then shape the way in which they will look at the topic of risk in future. So I think with those few words, maybe Harsh,
And
you
and
can
just
take it
quickly
forward.
on that point, if you could also tell me your uh, probably perspective on reaction versus response. Because you're speaking about crisis, you're speaking about how organizations who've gone through
Hmm.
damage
Hmm.
have bounced back stronger because then you realize the preparedness levels need to be high. But then isn't that a reactive approach? Where are we on preparedness of response?
Yeah, that is true. And fortunately, see, this is the time when reaction was more prevalent than response. I would say the concept of risk management and proactive identification of risks and mitigation is a very recent phenomenon. Maybe last 10 years, 15 years. Till then, we spoke about black swans, and then we said, okay, once in a way it will happen. Now we are seeing black swans are happening regularly. The it is it, I think there's a very strong case for proactive risk management. All those people who did not succeed because the reaction did not work. Now, probably all the employees of those companies, when they are there in other companies, they would be very effective risk managers. So,
So
the way
history always has something to teach.
history always has something to teach, and I also feel the way you learn also makes a difference. Now, some of us learn by reading,
Yeah.
some of us learn by listening, and some of us learn only from personal experience. So, I think that's also true for companies
Great.
in
I'm
some
going to
ways.
come back to you on two Black Swan events. Sandeep, at this point, since he's spoken about risk management evolution, if you could highlight or how would one assess corporate India's evolution of risk management? And what do you think is really the crux of risk management maturity in India Inc. today?
Thanks, Harsh. I think if you look back the history of GI industry and its evolution, prior to 2000, we largely had four public sector entities, and you had GIC, which is the national reinsurer, and 2000 2001 onwards, the privatization actually kicked in, and the licenses were given. So today, at this point in time, we have some total 32 odd insurance companies, 28 plus 4. So clearly the industry has moved the needle. So when we all joined, the industry size was about 10,000 crores. Today is about 3 lakh crores. So at that point in time when we were going to the clients, the requirement was very simple. Okay, they just wanted to ensure that whatever an insurance company stands for, you please deliver that. Okay, so if you are going to give me an insurance policy copy, please ensure that you give it to me in that particular time frame. If you stand for giving me claims when it happens, please ensure that you give me adequate adequate claim settlement happens, and also within a reasonable time frame. So the expectation was extremely simple and hygienic, requirements which were there. And in fact, in that sense, it also reflected the mindset of people, and the basic needs were not really satisfied by the erstwhile, setup. So as things evolved, since 2010 onwards, or maybe up to 2020, that is a decade where I would say there was a big shift in the way in which the clients looked at the insurance company and the insurance industry. When I say this, there was a lot of background to it, because up to 2008 or so, our entire insurance industry was governed very strongly by the regulator, as well as there was a pricing methodology which was being followed, and hence there was no flexibility in terms of giving anything different. So every product was in a way commoditized. Every insurance company had to give the same wordings. Every insurance company had to give the same price, and hence the product eventually became commoditized. There was no real differentiation up to 2008-9. Since then, in that 10 years ensuing 2008 to 2018, markets were opened up. De-tariffing happened, pricing crashed at that point in time, and as the industry was not matured at that point in time, we went to a level where it was extremely difficult to even survive. So that is where clients also started to realize that insurance is not only about driving the cost down, but it was also equally important to understand what is the risk on which they are sitting at. Yeah, insurance is not only about driving the cost down, but also expecting the insurers really to contribute to them in terms of their journey of risk identification, risk management, and then eventually taking a cover which is suitable for their own specific requirements and needs. So that's how the your risk, the expectation of an insurance company started to evolve. That beyond insurance products, how can you partner with us on risk identification, risk management, and then finally, of course, there is transfer. But for the
It's a
last
full
3 years,
suite of solutions that,
yeah, just to finish the last leg. So the way in which I look at it, so 2020 onwards, I mean,
Yeah.
last 3 or 4 years, very clearly, the expectation has gone to the next level. What the clients typically say is that we are becoming very large. India is going through a very big transition. Corporate India, large corporates are becoming more bigger. Okay, more and more formalization of the economy has started to happen. Small company becoming large, large becoming conglomerates. And the question really is that will you be able to support my aspirations? Okay, will insurance industry can really contribute so that finally they can really drive their growth journeys. And it is not only about the capacities to underwrite, but it is again proactive identification as to in the next 3 years, 5 years, if this is the size I'm going to become, if this is the areas which India is going to open up, what are the potential risk which India is going to face and eventually what I'm going to face, and can you help me not only identify that but also give me a plan to really mitigate it. So I think the expectation has really gone to the next level in terms of the expectation from the insurance industry.
sure. And what are the top three risks that you are seeing in India Inc. right now? I mean, I know we've released the report, but something more towards ICICI Lombard where you are partnering with clients and really supporting them in risk transfer.
So the way in which, I mean, one of the biggest areas which clients are really concerned about is cyber. I mean, clearly media has been all over the place. India is now become the capital of cyber attacks.
Yeah.
Every client, now even the SMEs, even the startup community, we have a separate team who basically addresses the requirements of the startup community. The first thing that they today asking is whether can you give me a cyber cover. So I think they are paranoid, and I think they should be. And it is all about whether on when are they going to get attacked, not about whether.
And I
they're
think
going
the
to get
investor
attacked.
community has woken up as well. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
PE funds and
Absolutely.
angel investors have started to demand that kind of governance and risk practices from startups as well.
So again, if you look at it, the way in which it is evolving, it is not only about giving them a product. It is not only transferring the risk. It will also, you need to also start getting into the risk culture which sir spoke about. That finally it is only one click of a button is required to actually open up your systems.
Sure.
So I think Steve is here and he really drives the Steve from ICICI Lombard. He's our CISO.
Yeah.
And he keeps on driving this simple fact about the phishing attacks. Can you really avoid that? And there are a lot of these mails which keep on coming, and they teach us that please don't click on some of these random emails which start coming in, and you can just open up the organization systems. So cyber clearly is really up there. And I think the partnership of insurance company with the clients on building the risk resilience on cyber is going to be very, very important and critical going forward. Second one is the business interruption. So, we spoke about when we started the session that it is not only about the risks which are there in the country, but risks which are actually happening or events which are happening across the globe can actually impact the supply chains. Pandemic actually showed that. Or even if you look at the ash clouds which had got developed some years back, the European market just couldn't supply the engines and machinery, and the entire automobile sector in India had got impacted. I think the business interruption and the supply chain risk is clearly one of the topmost items which is there in the agenda of most corporates.
Sure. Gaurav, let me bring you in at this point. He's spoken about cyber and, with the increasing NatCat events or the cyber situation with AI and blockchain and robotics. How do you typically look at all these scenarios when you're doing your underwriting? Because clearly we're not astrologers, but at the same time we need to make sure that we get a good night's sleep. So what really is your philosophy towards bringing these scenarios and unknown events into your underwriting process?
I think it's a great question, Harsh. Clearly, I think cyber risk and the climatic changes along with the technology infrastructure are becoming key elements for any company today. Some time back, we always used to think really about that climatic risk or the losses which really happen is a once in a lifetime event. But we have started seeing them happening, I think quarter on quarter, not only even year on year. For instance, when we talked about Chennai floods, the last time it had happened in 2015, and it really happened just last year again. Kerala has always been going through one kind of a catastrophe or the other, whether it's epidemics or pandemics or the recent Wayanad, which had really happened about. With the infrastructure development which is really happening around, and with the climatic changes which is really happening around, it is not only the frequency of the events which is becoming bigger and bigger, but it is a severity of the event also which is really becoming bigger and bigger. It's not that climatic changes never used to really exist in the past. But giving you an example, more and more hydropower development really happening in the Himalayan belt, more and more infrastructure built development really in terms of roads, bridges, canals happening on the northeast side of the country, along with the climatic changes. It is really compelling people to come out with the bigger, much more bigger losses which we really see around. The Teesta Power which had really happened, it was a close to a 15,000 crores event. Nobody, I think when we do our scenario calculations at our end, honestly, if you ask me, had we written that particular claim, we would not have assumed a 15,000 crores event really happening around. For us, it would have been a few thousand crores really event happening. So it is compelling more and more for us to also look at beyond the visible risk, beyond the experiences of the past, because truly what we believe now is something, some experience of the past is really not going to, we can rely on for the events which really happen in the future. And the same is true for cyber risk. We believe there are only three kind of companies which exist on cyber. The companies which have already been attacked. The second is probably who have been attacked but they are not aware about it. There is a virus which is already sitting in their servers. Third is the ones which are going to be potentially be attacked. There cannot be any other company. So we don't personally believe there would be any company which can't really be really attacked. I think best of the software companies who have been developing softwares related to cyber for other companies have also themselves got attacked. That's the scenario of really cyber attacks really happening around. But I think the key change which I also want to really talk about is the shift which has to do, and we talked about here, the technology risk, right? The technology risk becoming bigger and bigger. And I would just like to share the trends which is happening, which would probably allow you to understand the impact which either the cyber is happening or the climatic changes happening or the technology changes are really being. And you have to share the trends which have really been brought out in the technology. If you look at India, I think it's a $250 billion technology sector. It's going to become $350 billion, almost growing at a CAGR of 15%. If you look at 1995 or late 1990s or early 2000, when we used to talk about technology, it used to be, and sectors of technology used to be more to do with KPOs, BPOs. Yep. Basic technology work used to really happen in terms of maintaining softwares, maintaining applications, or maintaining or creating those basic softwares for the businesses. The next 10 years, which is the next decade, it moved from KPOs, BPOs to more to consultancies. It created more and more software which are more integrated with the businesses. So softwares which allowed you to take business decisions, which probably allowed you to have storage around the business and take probably some of, so it got more and more integrated with your business in it, whether it was manufacturing, whether it was technology, whether it's hospitality. So most of the softwares got created for the businesses. The third phase, which we now call it as, is where applications are created for not only for consultancy, but more and more business transformation is really happening around. So technology is really evolving around strategies of the businesses itself, which are really getting created. Most of the strategic initiatives which a business houses creates is lying on the platform of the technology infrastructure. A lot of cyber changes really, which is really bringing out, it is happening on probably the technology platform. A lot of AI and ML related initiatives which is really happening around is happening on that technology. So imagine the first decade, which was basic work, to the second decade, which is more to do with business related projects, to the third one, which is related to business transformation, right? So now if there is a technology incident which has to happen or impact of cyber which has to happen, it doesn't only impact your business. It impacts your future revenues, it impacts your brand, it impacts the huge exposures which you are really capturing.
In fact, I was just coming to that point because with rising deep fakes and even fake news or misinformation that we are seeing specifically induced by cyber events, is there something that ICICI Lombard is doing, or do you have a product around it? Maybe you want to talk about that.
So I think as the risk get evolved, the insurance industry is always curating products which takes care of the specific needs of the customers. A lot of these risks which we anticipate Of course, there are products which really exist and get curated very specific to these particular risks which are there. Cyber is, of course, one particular risk. I would have to really share with you today, there are embedded products which are really be given in terms of the technology as well as cyber, because these are two common threats which is really emerging out. Deepfakes are becoming increasingly more and more particular. I think I have seen technology getting used in frauds.
Yeah.
I think today you get phone calls which is more robot calls where people are saying you have not paid for electricity bills, or your bank accounts are going to get blocked. And it's not an individual which is really responding. It's a deep fake. It's an AI-led calls which are really happening.
Yeah.
So I think technological changes are really happening everywhere. It is important for us that we are ready to cover those kind of exposures at an insurance industry. And I think it is equally important when we talk about skill sets, the talent. There is a significant shift of learning those particular risks which is even present in the insurance companies to understand that risk better, so that they can create more and more better products at their end.
Sure. So I think cyber sits basically in every function now, and largely it's about also preparing your employees, cyber literacy as we call it, to make sure that they're not clicking on the wrong mail or and reporting those incidents back into the risk function. Venkatesh, quickly coming to you to summarize any two black swan events that you want to leave with our amazing audience. Some unknown event that you can think of, because you're very good with crystal ball gazing.
Absolutely not. No, but the point that he was making about technology, it suddenly reminded me of the Terminator series.
Okay.
Right? So it is now a fight between two technologies, the good technology versus the bad technology, and now we have to see who eventually wins, rather than good human being versus bad human being.
Yeah.
So I've already given you, this is possibly it's no longer a black swan because I've spoken about it, right? But once you have spoken about it, it's no longer a black swan. Yesterday there was also in the same discussion, there was a discussion on whether climate risk is a black swan, and someone said it is moving to become a grey rhino. But in reality, according to me, it is neither. It is a reality.
Yeah, it's a risk. It's a current risk.
It is not a risk. It's happened.
It's happened.
So once it has happened, it can no longer be a risk, right? So, we are already swimming in black swans. Now the only question is the very nature of black swan being the fact that you don't know what is going to happen next, which is a very low likely event which is going to eventually hit us. We do not know, right? I would not hazard a guess. And therefore, because I've tried doing this, a lot of scenario analysis over the past 10 years.
One of the steel companies that I was talking to, the CRO has said that aliens entering my plant is a black swan.
Yeah.
And that could be 10 years from now.
Possible.
But they're saying we need to all start looking at even such unknown situations.
Yeah. And people would generally laugh off at such things in the past. In one of the business continuity planning exercise we started way back in 2003. So one of the questions we were discussing is what will happen if the TV tower falls on our head, because we were very close to the TV tower. Our office was over there, and of course there was a lot of sniggers around that. Kya baat kar rahe ho? Aise kaise ho sakta hai? And believe you me, 5 years later we had that the terrorist attacks, which fortunately stopped about 10 kilometers from my office. Right. So now maybe a TV tower did not come on your head, but something equivalent or something worse was very close from your office. And now what I find is people have stopped becoming skeptical about, like the same alien example. Had you said it in the past, everybody would have laughed. Now we will say, ho sakta hai. Bottom line.
These communication devices attacks could have been a black swan. It is no longer a black swan. Now you can expect anything.
The video was shocking.
It was. Communication, pagers and everyday use also can be used as weapons. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
Correct.
Great.
So I just want to make this point finally that bottom line is black swan cannot be avoided. It will keep coming. The only mitigation measure is to have very strong, resilient organization. That means irrespective of what happens, it's something like if your body has got a very good immunity level, then even if COVID comes and hits you, it will hit you, you'll get COVID, but it will go away. But on a weak body, you're sure that you will go back to your heavenly abode. So make sure that you make your organization very resilient so that irrespective of what happens, you're able to withstand it.
Sandeep, any concluding remarks? 30 seconds.
No, I think we all have big responsibility, honestly, to ensure that whatever opportunities are being presented by the ecosystem, external environment as well as the domestic environment, it's extremely important for our future generations that we are, able to realize all of that and ensure that we, as a country, really rise up to that potential. And I think the inherent aspect is really to ensure that we are resilient as a country, as a entity, as an individual. And everything then starts with identifying the risk and then the mitigation of it.
Okay, thank you. Gaurav, any concluding?
I would just like to say that a lot of regulations are happening around what we call it as KYC, know your customer, right? And every company is responsible for that. I think equally important for every company is KYR, which is know your risk. So every company should know what are the relative risks which are associated for them. And then only they would be able to probably take decisions either to avoid or probably transfer them.
Super. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being a patient audience, and thank you, panelists.